Go outside and wait for the bus, okay? Just stay right where you are. We do appreciate you watching, though, and we appreciate you even better when you come down and where we can hug you. So come and join us. You know, in this series, Let's Go, we've been looking at what it means to make Jesus' last words our first priority. Before he ascended into heaven in Acts 1:8, he says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witness in Jerusalem and all of Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." So in week 1, we looked at what it means to be a witness in Jerusalem, or our own community, witnessing to our neighbors, our co-workers, the cashier at the supermarket, those people that we run into on a daily basis. And last week, we looked at our Judea, or our country, and what would make a difference in America if more people knew Jesus as their personal Savior. So today we look at how we can be witnesses in our Samaria. So let me start with a question. Does anybody here today or listening online remember when they learned how to drive? I mean, people, you can hold up your hands, hold them high, especially those that you are listening online because I can't see you. Maybe the better question would be, how many of you remember teaching someone how to drive? Because that gets a little scarier. I mean, I have 3 kids, and I know as a parent that has tried to teach a kid how to drive, well, there's a couple of things that all of you are going to know about that I'm going to talk about. First of all, there's that imaginary brake that's on the passenger side. Everybody knows about that. And then there is the oh shoot handle. And I don't know if you know that handle I'm referring to. It's the handle just above the window that maybe you grab when something goes horribly wrong in a traffic situation. And you may refer to it by another name, but I'm trying to keep it PG in here this morning. Now, the kids read the driver's handbook. They go in, they take the learner's permit test. Then suddenly, they're at a legal age where they can drive with a licensed adult. But because we love our kids, we just don't throw them out there and say good luck with that and hope you figure it out. No, it becomes the oh shoot season. It's a time of apprenticeship. We learn to drive when someone who knows how to drive is getting in the car with us and showing us, how to work the turn signals and how to accelerate. More importantly, how to brake. And, all those different things. How to operate the windshield wipers. All the meanings of the signs on the street. All that stuff. And in most cases, it could be a little scary. I know when my oldest son was getting old enough to drive, I took him to the parking lot of the warehouse I was working at the time. And we drove around that parking lot on a Saturday when it was closed, and so there was plenty of room for him to maneuver and get around. But we came to the conclusion, because back then I had a little Ford Escort, a little 5-speed manual car, and we came to the conclusion that the pedals in that small car were too small for his size 13 foot to be able to hit the brake and not the accelerator at the same time. So it got a little scary at times. And there were times where I really didn't want to get back in the car with him as he was learning how. But there's something for us to learn here as a church. We don't become disciples by just studying the book. I mean, that's great. It's not about studying the book and taking a test. We need to come under someone else's guidance, someone who knows how to drive. And we learn to drive by driving. So in an apprenticeship situation, someone who loves us, Jesus, invites us to get into the driver's seat on his mission. And he says, let's go. And He sends us to people and places that we don't know, and it can be scary. It may be a little risky. But He goes before us and is with us. And as we drive Jesus' mission wildly forward on earth, He should be the one grabbing the shoot handle. And if He's not grabbing that handle, well, maybe our spiritual life is in park. Most churches slam on the brakes when Jesus says, we must go through Samaria. And we say, wait a minute, Lord, you don't mean the other side of the tracks. No, you don't mean those people. I mean, the people that we dislike. You don't mean those people. Maybe even the ones we say we hate. Where is your personal Samaria? The place you don't want to go. Who are the Samaritans? The people you try to go around or away from rather than towards. In order to fulfill the call of Acts 1:8, we need to go through Samaria. So let's go. You may want to grab your Bibles because we don't have an shoot handle, but hold on to them. We may need them this morning, and maybe we can say a few prayers as we go on mission. And I know you may be saying, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. But Jesus modeled it. He left heaven to be with us. My soul needs it. In my soul is that innate desire. And when I get in the car with my son, I may not have wanted to go, but I needed to. It's just to know that he's okay. So, when the teaching team met, we settled on this question together. Why should I join Jesus in mission with my Samaritans? Why should we? I mean, it's easy to stay in Jerusalem and Judea. They're familiar to us. We know what to do there. I'm doing pretty good at maybe witnessing to my friends and family. I mean, they know I go to church on Sunday mornings, so isn't that enough? Well, if I were showing my son the car and handing them the keys and saying that's enough, well, then maybe you're right. But why should I join Jesus in mission with my Samaritans? Number one is because Jesus modeled it. Jesus showed us what it's like to go to a Samaria. John 4, verses 3 through 5, we see the story. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee, and he had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. If you're following along in your message notes, I want you to underline or circle those words, he had to go. I mean, Jesus did not have to go any more than he had to come to earth to save us. But Jesus had to go through Samaria because he was on mission. He was doing the work the Father sent him to do. And Samaria is kind of off the map. It's geographically close, but culturally worlds apart. And a little bit of history on the Samaritans and the Jews. After the separation of Judah and Israel in the 9th century, King Omri of the northern kingdom bought the hill of Shemar, and he built there the city of Samaria, which became his capital. And while many of the inhabitants of the city and surrounding area of Samaria were led off to captivity, some farmers and others were left behind. So what happened? Well, Jeroboam became the first king up north around 920 BC. And he set up golden calves for them to worship so they wouldn't have to return to Jerusalem. And when Assyria conquered Samaria 200 years later, it moved the leading Hebrews out and moved out other conquering people in. Soon, however, the trouble is that the land that Assyria returned a few priests to teach them worshiping God, but the people intermarried, and their faith grew more varied and diverse from all the different religions that were coming in. And they were called half-breeds by the Jews, who looked down on them. And the two peoples often called each other names. And by Jesus' time, back then, Jews went around Samaria. In other words, if they were traveling down to Judea, they would cross the river and go around. Because if you got in with Samaritans, you were made unclean. Or maybe you would get beat up or robbed or any of these things that they were afraid of. In fact, just a few years before Jesus' birth, Samaritans defiled the temple in Jerusalem by throwing human bones in it. So after a millennium of growing separation, hostility, Jesus tells his disciples to go and be witnesses in Samaria. So how are we feeling about that? Where is your Samaria? Who are your Samaritans? Is it the other side of the tracks? Are they a different skin color than yours? Have a different accent? Maybe they root for the wrong team or political party. Whether I like it or not, we all have Samaritans. I have Samaritans. Do you? Now, a good Jew of that day, like I said, would make the journey from Galilee to Judea by crossing the river and going around Samaria, then crossing the river again to get back into Judea. So when Jesus said that he was going through Samaria, the disciples must have lost their minds. And I'm sure this was their oh shoot handle moment. What's he doing now? But once again, Jesus is on mission. And I love Jesus' missional approach here that he uses. He doesn't run into Samaria and tell them they're all going to hell. He sits down by the well and has a conversation with a woman about water. Water. Not theological doctrine or history. Water. We need to learn from our driving instructor. We need to learn different ways. But Jesus' life, the incarnation, the going to others is our blueprint. And we know something about this woman. I mean, most of the women came out in the cool of the morning to fetch water before it got hot. And this was also their time to socialize together because there were no phones back then. But this woman is out in the heat of the day by herself, which probably means nobody wanted her. We also learned that this woman has been trying to fill that God-shaped hole in her heart with relationships. She's been married 5 times and is currently living with a man she's not married to. Jesus asks her for water. Something a man, especially a Jewish man, would have never done. And I could just see him just leaning back like there's nothing going on at all. This woman is just here. It's not that she's a Samaritan. It's not that she's a woman. I'm just going to enjoy a cool drink of water. Maybe he sips that water and I can just see it. Maybe he'll run it down in his beard or onto his robe. And then he tells this woman about living water or having a relationship with Christ. So here are a couple of pointers from the woman at the well story. He came into her space. He entered her world. He took her world seriously. He found life-affirming things about her. He gave witness before witness. He released her to be with her people as a leader. And she was empowered to reach her own people. And a revival broke out. And you can tell real transformation here because this is how it happened. Nobody would come to the well with her. And now all of a sudden they were all running out with her to see Jesus. So let's go together. We are empowered by the relationship because we can witness, but first we must have that witness. And before we witness, we must be with someone. We must, and I'm not just talking about being in proximity of them. We need to be talking to them and listening to their story, knowing where they are, beginning with them in knowing where they're at, not only in life but in their walk with God. We must go as persons of peace, not the you have to do it my way kind of attitude. In the Kairos prison ministry, our motto is listen, listen, love, love. That's not a bad motto for any ministry in Samaria. And whether your Samaria is a prison or somewhere else you'd rather not go, but we must go. You're called to reach Samaritans. The Samaritans that only you can reach with the gifts that God has given you. So why should I join Jesus in mission with my Samaritans? Number 2, my soul needs it. We know that there are things that God has designed us to have. I mean, we long to be together. We long to have a relationship with Him. And until we get there, we feel like something is missing. Our soul needs it. Even when we'd rather not get in the car, it may not be easy. It may not always work. Luke 9:51 through 56 tells us of a time when it was not easy for Jesus and the disciples. As the time drew near for Him to ascend to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He sent messengers ahead to Samaritan village to prepare for His arrival. But the people of the village did not welcome Jesus because He was on His way to Jerusalem. When James and John saw this, they said to Jesus, "Lord, should we call down fire from heaven to burn them up?" But Jesus turned and rebuked them. And so they went on to another village. Now, sometimes it's easier to come and take charge and take names. Power evangelism is easier than witness evangelism. And the majority of millennials say this. They say they think evangelism is wrong. And I don't blame them if the evangelism is about fixing or taking or managing someone else's life or making them just another notch in your belt. That's not what Jesus did. That's not the evangelism He taught. But how much would we have to hate someone not to share Jesus? To share Jesus' love with them. And that's one reason we do fresh expressions of church. The discipleship comes after listening and loving and serving and building relationship. We must listen, show we love them, serve them, and only then we can start to build a community. It's then that they start exploring discipleship. It's then when it becomes a church that is forming. But even if it doesn't work, like Jesus and the disciples heading to Samaria, failure is to be expected. But we learn from failure of what not to do the next time. We call it failing forward. So the first step in the witness is getting to the place where we can have a deep longing to be with one another. For those of you that know the steps, it's step 12, having a spiritual awakening. We're healed from isolation through witness. It's a mutual exchange of blessings. It's not a one-way street. I mean, why should I join Jesus in mission with my Samaritans? Well, it's because, number 3, together with my Samaritans, we are empowered by it. Look with me at Luke 10:33. It says, "Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him." And I'm sure you remember this story. A man sets out from Jerusalem on his way to Jericho. He is attacked by robbers, and he's beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. A priest passes by but offers no help. Next, a Levite or an assistant to the temple priest turns the other way and goes on his way. But finally, a Samaritan comes by and helps the man. So the person the Jews would expect to be the villain of the story turns out to be the hero. Because above the priest and the Levite, he showed compassion. True compassion sees people made in the image of God, people of sacred worth and of great value, and not as objects. Now, historically, we have not been very good at doing ministry to or for. But we have a shift to doing ministry with. And I will admit, the first time I went into the prison, it was scary. I mean, I'd been through all the training. I knew Jesus was with me. But when that iron door slammed behind me, I knew I was in a whole new world. But what I found was not only that Jesus was with me, but He had gone before me, preparing hearts, working things out so that the right men would be there that weekend. He even had the right man sitting next to me that I'm pretty sure hated me at first, but by Saturday was sharing his life with me. I've got a video I want you to see.
I'm going to tell you about Kairos, this prison ministry that comes inside them walls. It's a dead man. A lot of people say we dead men. I mean, I was just a madman. Everybody got a story. But when you really get touched by God, that's when you know you got a real story. Well, my name is Tommy Fisher. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I grew up in the street gangs there. I got a lot of trouble. I ended up doing 20 years, 11 months flat in prison. I had an aggravated life sentence. I wasn't supposed to never get out. I ran the gangs in prison, you know, and I hurt a lot of men for some crazy reasons. I used to actually get Christians beat up because they say they wanted to come to Christ. That's how crazy and radical I was. But when they pick Kairos, they only pick the worst inmates on the unit because they want the roughest dudes on the unit, the fools, to get changed. And this ministry is actually going in here and showing this love and changing people like that. I'm gonna tell you the truth, I went for their food. I didn't go to get saved, but God had set me up. When I was sitting there, man, you know, I was listening to this dude talk. You know when Paul was on the road to Damascus and Jesus' presence knocked him off that horse? I know for a fact I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. I felt it like Paul felt it. And from that day forward, man, God has just been blessing my life. While I was in that prison, I got into this Theropon Theological Seminary and Bible Institute. I got a bachelor's degree in biblical studies. I also went to college and I got me an LBT. I just thank God for God blessing me. I got a license to counsel, you know. And I really thank God for what He changed me into because I used to be a monster. I used to really be a monster. The only reason why I don't know if I ever killed a man because I never went back and asked the man who I shot was he dead. But I shot a lot of people and I hurt a lot of people's lives. But ministries like Kairos can go inside them walls and show a man God's love. Man, if I could tell anybody about Kairos, man, it's changing lives. Because I got to give God back what He gave me. He gave me back my life. He gave me them years that the locust stole from me. He gave them back to me. And I'm thankful for it.
Now, Kairos Prison Ministry is not for everyone. Or is it? Is God placing this Samaria on your heart today? Pray about it and come and talk to me. But training meetings are going on right now, so you'd have to be there Tuesday night if you plan on going into the prison the first weekend in May. Maybe you're not feeling that call to go in. Well, you can still help. You can pray for the weekend. You can help financially because we pay for food for the weekend as well as other supplies that we need. And the money comes from you guys. You can indeed go into the prison without going through that slamming iron door. Jesus is calling you to get in the driver's seat of His mission. You know, He will be beside you, showing you the way. But He's saying, let's go. And there's going to be some, oh, shoot, handle moments as we drive forward in His mission. We drive wildly forward in the world. But all of us are called to go. We are an apostlehood of believers who are the Samaritans in your life. The ones you would rather avoid. The ones you don't want to see. The ones you have thought about maybe calling down fire from heaven like in the verse we just read. The ones that maybe seem unreachable. The ones with different political views. The ones that seem like outcasts. How do you personally plan to reach them? Well, because Jesus modeled it, because our soul needs it, and because together we're empowered. Grace Church has multiple fresh expressions and ministries that go on throughout our community. How are you involved in them? You can get involved right here. You can help out with the meals that we prepare. You can help out by greeting people. You can help out at Choose Recovery on Monday night. And if God is working on you to come into the prison, talk to me. You know, I've really never felt scared in there because He's with me. Let's be pioneers or supporters or maybe permission givers. One of the beautiful things about Fresh Expressions of Church, that movement, is that it releases the whole priesthood of believers to be the church where everybody gets to play. We all have a Samaria, and we can turn those places that we don't want to go to into a form of church. We can turn our passions, our practices, into forms of church. A new missional frontier that looks a lot like Samaria. You see, Jesus is giving you an invitation. He's saying, get in. Let's go. So will you join Him? The band's back up. We're going to do one more song together. And as we do, our altar is open, and you might want to come and pray about what God is putting on your heart. Where is your Samaria? Who are your Samaritans? How is Jesus going to use you to further His mission on earth? Let's stand and worship together. Come to the altar as you feel the Spirit lead.